All right, we will get started. Hope everyone is doing well.
Thank God.
Okay, and let me just get the source sheet up for you. Okay, we are in Parshat Mishpatim. Before I begin, just want to dedicate the learning for a refuah shlema for Arthur, who had a procedure today, and
Oh, thank you.
Tell
Baruch Hashem.
tell the rabbi even name.
Avraham ben Saran, correct?
Nope.
Oh, no. Avraham ben Chaya.
Ben Chaya, Avraham ben Chaya.
Avraham Halevi ben Chaya.
Avraham Halevi ben Chaya, thank you.
Thank you.
So refuah shlema to Avraham Halevi ben Chaya, and we hope to see him back with us next week. Or
Amen.
so Parshat Mishpatim is, we're in this sort of transition point in what the Torah fundamentally is. So last week we read at the end of the Parsha, Elon read for us at the end of the Parsha, the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments. And that in case we had any question until that point, certainly by now we are fully into what is called the legal portion of the Torah, right? Primarily, we're going to be focused on laws.
Mhm.
From now until the end, there still is, of course, story and a plot line. But whereas in Sefer Breshit, the first half of Sefer Shmot, the plot lines, the stories were what was central, and there was very little in terms of any legal commandments or focus. That's our primary focus, certainly from here on in. And next week we'll be introduced to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle, which will form the major focus of the rest of Sefer Shmot, and then
Always knew it.
with Vayikra, we'll have this focus on the sacrifices.
Always.
Parshat Mishpatim focuses on what we call the Mishpatim, which we generally translate as civil laws, where oftentimes we'll hear about Mishpatim as being the common sense laws, the laws that even if we were not given a Torah, these are laws that we probably would have come to on our own or come to something similar on our own, right? Every society needs to have civil laws by which it's governed, and the Jewish society is no different. And so and there's a lot, so this week's parsha is basically a laundry list of many of those mishpatim, many of those civil laws.
Hello.
And there's some attempts to try to make sense of the order in which they're presented, and try to understand if there is any logic to them. But if you read it, it's really just sort of a long running list, and it's not clear that there's a connection from one to the next. So that's where we find ourselves, and we're going to focus tonight on the very beginning of the parsha, the first of the Mishpatim. I think in a previous year we spoke about the very first word is Ve'ele HaMishpatim, and right, the English doesn't even say it, but it's Ve'ele, and these are the laws. Rashi makes a big point to say that vav, the vav, right, the vav hachibor, it's a connecting vav. It's a vav that connects what came previously. So Rashi makes the point to say that just as what we read previously, the Ten Commandments obviously were given at Har Sinai, so the Mishpatim, so all the lists and halachot that we're about to learn were given at Har Sinai. And we shouldn't think that one is any more important than the other. Okay, that's just a very quick review of something that we dealt with much more deeply in previous years. But if we continue, Ve'ela hamishpatim asher tasim lifnehem, these are the rules, these are the laws, the civil laws, which you shall place or you shall set before them. Ki tikne eved ivri, sheish shanim ya'avod, v'ashvi'i titzei chofshi chinam. When you buy a Hebrew servant He shall serve you for 6 years, and in the seventh will go free. Im begapo yavo begapo yetze, im balishahu v'yatsa ishto imo. If he came single, he will leave single. If he had a wife, his wife shall leave with him. Im adonav yitain lo isha v'yaldalo banim o banot, ha'isha v'yaladet tiel adonah v'hu yetze begapo. If during the course of his servitude, his master gives him a wife, then the wife and any children that are born from that relationship remain. Um, it's a disturbing way to describe it, but remain in the possession, I guess, of the master, and just the servant goes free at the end. Im amar yomar ha'eved, ahavti et adoni et ishti ve'banai lo etzei chavshi. And if the servant says, I like my life here, right? Or in the situation where he was given a wife and perhaps began to build a family, and he says, I don't want to go free. I want to stay here. I don't want to go free. V'gisho Adonav el Elohim, v'gisho el adelet olam mezuzav, v'artzah Adonav et oznav v'martzeya ve'avado le'olam. So his servant, his master, must take him to, it says Elohim, but we understand that to be based in. Right? Elohim is a name for God, but Elohim also means judges. Elohim means here means he's taken to the court, and they put this servant up against the doorposts, and they use an awl or some sort of instrument, some sort of tool, and they gorge a hole in his ear. And then he remains a slave, a servant, until it says le'olam, forever, but Halach understands that to be until the Yovel year. And then we have a second case, Vikim kor ish et bitola ama lo tetzei ketzei avadim, a case of when a father sells his daughter into servitude. Imra b'nei adoneha asher lo ya'adav efta la'am nochri lo yimshal lemochra bevigdo ba. If she proves to be displeasing to her master, who designated her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He shall not have the right to sell her to outsiders, since he broke fair faith with her. And if the master designates this Jewish girl for his son, then she should be treated like all other women who enter into marriage. If he takes a second wife, then he must not withhold from her she'ira kisutava onata. We see these as the three basic obligations that a husband has to wife in marriage: clothing, food and shelter, and sexual relations. So he cannot withhold that from her. This, by the way, this is the source for where we get these obligations and these responsibilities that a husband has to his wife. And if he refuses or he fails in these three areas, then she shall be set free. Okay, so we're going to focus primarily on the big question. And the big question is, why does the Torah begin its presentation of the Mishpatim, of the civil laws? Why does it begin with these two cases of slaves? If I were to ask you, tell me about Jewish civil law, what would be the first? What would be your starting point? Anyone to posit anyone have any thoughts on that?
It would be the year that we have to set all the slaves free.
Okay, that's an interesting starting point. Maybe we could go more basic, right? Something about be a good person, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, maybe having a court system. It seems like an odd place to start, and we're going to come to that question in a moment. Okay, that's going to be the big question for tonight: is why is this the case, the laws with which the Torah begins its presentation? This one is focus. Before we get too much into that, I wanted to give just a little bit more context on this set of halachot. So there's actually two other places where the Torah addresses what's called the Eved Ivri, the Hebrew servant. So one of them is in Sefer Devarim, where we read, Ki macher lecha achicha ha'ivri o arviya v'avdecha shesh shanim v'ashna shvit yishlachenu chavshtim me'imach. If a man or a Hebrew man or woman is sold to you as a servant, they should serve you for 6 years, and in the seventh year you must set them free. Ki tishalchenu chavshtim imach lo tishalchenu rekam. When you set them free, they shall not go empty-handed. Ha'anek tanik lo mitzoncha migarnacha mikvecha asher beracha Hashem Elokecha titen lo. You must ha'anek, furnish them with sheep, with wine, with wheat, with grains, with which God blessed you. Zacharta ki eved hayita be'eretz Mitzrayim v'yiftecha Hashem Elokecha al kein anochi mitzavcha tadavar hazeh hayom. And you shall remember that you were a servant in Egypt, and God redeemed you. Therefore, I'm commanding this to you. And we have this interesting halacha, this interesting commandment of ha'anaka, of right, which it's translated as furnishing, that you have to provide for them. You can't send when the time to set the servants free comes, you can't send them empty-handed.
So if you set them free in the 7th year, what happens in the 8th year?
In the 8th year, they're no longer servants. They're set free.
How do you run your home and your farm and your business without servants back then?
That's a good question. So, right, this is specific to a Hebrew slave, to an Eved Ivri. If you are so dependent on slave labor, so there's two other categories of slaves, but the non-Jewish slaves don't have this condition of being set free. So that's the simple answer to your question.
Okay.
I think the deeper answer, which we'll get to a little bit later, is a question about how desirable is it to depend on slave labor, and is that something that we should be doing? So it seems like maybe not, right? This is a temporary thing. That's and that I don't think it's ruining anything to say that now. The Rambam just summarizes these halachot, and he lays out some interesting things, which I thought was worthwhile to see. So we're in number 14. Eved Ivri. So we're dealing here with the case of the Eved Ivri, the Hebrew servant. Ha'amor b'Torah, ze Yisraeli shemachru oto beitin al korcho o mocher atzmo lirtzono. So this refers to a Hebrew, an Israelite, who was sold by Beit Din, right? Someone who incurs a lot of debt and can't repay the debt. So the Beit Din, as a punishment or a way to make restitution to the person that's owed money, sells this person into slavery. Or it's someone who sells himself because he's too impoverished. Ketzad. Ganav, how does this work? Ganav ein lo l'shalem et hakeren beitin mochin oto k'mo she'amarnu b'hilchot geneva. If he stole something and he doesn't have the money to repay that which was stolen, then Beit Din can sell him as a slave. Ein lecha ish b'Yisrael shemochin oto beit din ela haganav bilvad. This is the only instance in which Beit Din is empowered to sell someone into servitude in this manner. Okay, skip a couple lines. Mocher atzmo ketzad. What's the case, or how does it work that someone can sell themselves into servitude? So this is a Jew who becomes exceedingly impoverished. The Torah gives him permission to sell himself in order to as a way to relieve his debts. So then he goes on to say that if someone comes to this point, they can't remain in, they can't take whatever salary, whatever restitution they're given for their service in order to invest it in something else, but they have to use it directly to pay off their debt. Right? This should, to Cheryl's question, right? This really should be a very temporary situation. Again, 7 years sounds like a long period of time, but however the calculation was made, it's 7 years maximum in most situations. Now we go to halacha 6 in Hilchot Avadim in the Rambam. Kol eved ivri asur la'avod bo befarach. If someone is in this category of an eved ivri, a Hebrew slave, it is forbidden to give them avodat parach, excruciating labor. Ezuhi avoda parach. What is this forbidden type of work that you can't give them? Zo avodah she'ein la kitzva, ve'avodah she'eino tzaricha. There's two types of work that are considered excruciating labor. Number one is if you don't give a set quantity, right? You can say, please pick the apples off this tree, but you can't say pick apples until I tell you to stop. You have to give a set limit as to what, pick what's apples are picked into bushels or pecks, so bushel and a peck and a hug around the neck, right? So you have to give either a defined time or a defined quantity, but it can't be something which is indeterminate. So that's the first definition of avoda parach, and the second is avoda she'eno tzaricha. Can't be unnecessary work, right? You can't say, I have a servant, I want to see them suffer. I want to show my power over them. I'm going to tell them to fill up the bathtub and empty the bathtub, or go to the well, fetch water, just something that you don't need, right? So just to lord over them. That also is forbidden. So that's what he tells us in halacha 6. Again, you're welcome to go into more detail on your own by looking at the sources. Okay, so then we have another halacha, number 7. Kol eved ivri, asur l'Yisrael shekanuhu lavido b'dvarim bozim shehem yuchadim lasot avadim. Right, so if you have an eved ivri, you're not allowed to give them debasing tasks that are relegated. It's interesting. He says that are relegated for servants. Here we're talking about a servant, right? Presumably this means whether it means non-Jewish servants or sort of what's seen in society as being slave work, but you can't do that. So you can't, right? Whatever work you give them has to be work which is dignified work, which isn't too embarrassing or too beneath them. Right? So the example is kagon sheyoli chacharav kelav lebeit hamerchat so yachlot lo min alav, right? That he should carry all of your clothing, your bathrobe, whatever, to the bathhouse, or that he should remove your shoes for you. That's improper. That's debasing work. Eno nohegbo ela kisachir. You can only have him work like do the same type of work that you would have a hired laborer do. Right, so this Eved Ivri is not a full-blown slave. There is work that is work which is done by avadim. That is debasing work. This Eved Ivri cannot be given debasing work. And then finally, one more interesting halacha in number 9, source 17. Kol eved ivri o ama ivriya chayav adon lahashvotan lo b'ma'achal v'mashke b'chsut u'b'ma'ador. So if you have an eved ivri, you have to treat them as your equal with regard to food and drink and clothing or blankets. Shelo tehe ata ochel pat naki v'ochel pat kabar. Ata shoteh yain yashan v'shoteh yain chadash. Right? You can't have it that you are eating a better quality meal than your Eved Ivri, that you're drinking better quality wine than your Eved Ivri. You're sleeping on a proper mattress and he's sleeping on straw. Right? All these things are improper. You have to treat your Eved Ivri in the same manner as you, so much so that the Gemara says if there's only one pillow in the house, you have to allow the Eved Ivri to use that pillow. Okay, so it's an interesting category of if we're going to even call it servitude or slavery, it has very strict limits and parameters about what's allowed and what's not allowed. Okay, and with that, we can go back and address our big questions. So the first source that, again, everyone wrestles with this question, but the Shadal of Shmuel David Luzzatto from Italy in the 19th century, he says as follows: Ki tikneh haTorah asher dracheha darchei Noam rachamim patcha mishpateha b'mishpat ha'eved ve'ha'ama. The Torah we know is Torah Chesed, dracheha darchei Noam. Right? It's a Torah of kindness. It's a way of pleasantness and mercy. And it opens its civil laws with this rule of the Eved Ivri and the Amah Ivriya. Asher b'yamei kedem hayu nechshavim kebehema. Right? In ancient times, slaves were thought of like animals. Right? They wouldn't even be given an opportunity to bring their grievances against their masters to court. Right? He says that's in the world at large. By fact that the Torah opens with rules of the Eved Ivri, we should see that as a stark contrast to society around us. That society around us would treat servants like animals, like property, like chattel. No. And here the Torah goes into great detail in telling us all the rights that are afforded to the Hebrew servants. That's the point that Shadal is making. Okay, so we shouldn't think that it's, we might have thought it's surprising to open with this set of rules, but the Shadal says no, that this emphasizes the basic characteristic of Torah as being a Torah of Chol Nativoteh Shalom. All of its ways are peace.
Was I came in late, I apologize, but was there a reference made earlier to the concept of bondservant?
There was no reference made, but yeah, I mean, in
But
other
but
societies there are also limited forms of servitude, right? Indentured servant, a bond servant, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
but there are limits as well with inherent in that. So
yeah,
when Jamestown was set up down in Virginia as one of the first, if not the first, successful colony by the British, they had numerous European, that is white, as well as some black people who were there, not as slaves as such, but as indentured servants or bond servants,
yeah,
presumably following, at least in part, the pattern that the Torah lays out of how this sort of higher status of servant is to be treated somewhat better, and that there's a limit to how long they have to do the servitude to pay off the debt, the bond that they owe.
yeah, yeah. So right, so it's not so there are other we can look to other examples in other legal systems,
Well, I think that the
perhaps. Yeah,
Christian's view of that is actually taken from the Torah.
I'm
Uh,
sure it is. Yes.
so, yeah.
Yeah, so that the connection between British common law and the bio that's beyond me. I don't know, but yeah. Okay, so Rav Hirsch, I guess with similar, and he's really a contemporary of Luzzatto. He says that actually we might have been surprised, we moderns might be surprised by this being the introductory set of rules for the civil law, but Rav Hirsch says actually no, this is the only law that the Torah could have begun with, right? So yeah, obviously, because that is what the Torah begins with, so it has to be the only law the Torah could have begun with. But how does he explain it? Um, he says that this, right, much like Luzzatto said, that this is 4 lines down. They're very fundamentally different character of all other systems of law, right? That this really differentiates Torah law from other systems of law. This is the one and only case in which the Torah orders deprivation of freedom as a punishment. And how does it order it? It orders the criminal to be brought into the life of a family as we might expect a refractory child to be brought under the influence of a Jewish family. How careful is it that the self-confidence of the criminal should not be broken? It insists that he may not be separated from his wife and family and depriving him of his liberty and therefore thereby the means to provide for his dependents. The Torah puts the responsibility of caring for them on those who have the benefit of his labors. Right? So it's not right, it's setting up, right? This is much more if we were to kind of describe the details of how this person is treated, he's treated more like a rebellious child who you're trying to reform, to correct their ways in a loving manner, right? And within the framework of a family. So this servant is brought into the Jewish family.
And they didn't have to worry too long.
Rabbi David Gottlieb, who served at Shomei Amuna for many years. So he says as follows, elaborating on Rav Hirsch. Rav Shamshin Rafal Hirsch maintains that in fact this choice is most appropriate. He explains that all of the Torah's rules governing interpersonal relationships are predicated on the notion that people are created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of God. More than any specific character trait that a person may possess, it is the fact that they are ultimately the creations of the Almighty which demands that they be treated appropriately. All subsequent details flow from the first principle. In order to dramatically illustrate this point, Rav Hirsch continues, the Torah deliberately uses the thief as its first example. Even though he may be instinctively judgmental, we may be instinctively judgmental of such a person and hold him in low regard, nevertheless, even the thief is accorded certain basic rights. By starting with this example, someone on the lowest rung of the social ladder, we demonstrate that all people must be treated with basic respect and dignity. Okay, so a common theme as to why this is the example and this is the case with which the Torah begins is that it highlights the uniqueness of the Torah. I think I mentioned last week, perhaps, a really interesting idea about the question why the parsha that contains the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments, is Parshat Yitro, and begins the first half of that parsha is Yitro coming, and Yitro criticizing the court system. Sorry, just want to Arthur, it's wonderful to see you. You're on mute. You have to hit unmute.
Oh,
For Shlema, we hope that you have a complete recovery. And
everything went very well. All the people are very, very nice. And I can't drive for 5 days, but anyway, some other things. Yeah.
Baruch Hashem. For Shlema, it's wonderful to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Right. So we said the fact that Yitro introduces, sees and criticizes Moshe's way of administering justice, and then sets up a court system which Moshe and the Jewish people accept.
Right.
So one suggestion for why that might be is that the Torah wants us to have an authentic encounter with sort of secular, more general legal systems before we get the Torah. And we have to see what else is out there in order to appreciate just how unique and special the Torah is that we were about to get. So we have to have Yitro come before the giving of the Torah so that Yitro can give us exposure and experience with other types of legal systems in order that we can truly appreciate what the Torah is all about. Okay, so that might be and that might be playing itself out here, that with an understanding of how other societies treated their slaves, the Torah here is emphasizing to us how we have to be extra kind and go, above and beyond in treating our slaves. There's a follow-up question to that, which is beyond the scope of tonight's shir, which is, so why does it differentiate between how we treat Hebrew slaves and non-Hebrew slaves? That's a very good question. And that's a question for a different year. But at least let's recognize that that question is out there, and it is remarkable, perhaps, that we go to such lengths to treat our Hebrew servants so fairly, and even the non-Hebrew, the non-Jewish slaves are treated much better than they would have been in other societies, but it's not as good. And so that's a fair question to ask and to ponder.
Okay.
Maybe that'll be next year's year. We'll have to see what we come back to next year. But anyway, so that's point number one. Point number two is a fascinating idea that I heard or a few different ideas connected to this very strange practice, right? So we said that this Hebrew servant, this Eved Ivri, works for 7 years or 6 years. And the 7th year, the Shemitah year, he goes free. But he's given a choice if he doesn't want to go free after the Shemitah year, after the 7th year, he has the option of staying, right? As the Torah says, v'avado le'olam, to serve his master forever, right? We know that doesn't mean really forever, but that means until the Yovel, until the Jubilee year. And so, number one, why is that the case, right? Why should that be the case? Why specifically, if this is what he opts to do, does he have to pierce a hole in his ear? That's also a very strange halacha, a strange rule. And right, why specifically is it 6 years that he serves? What's the significance of 6? And so that's our second set of questions. Rashi quotes the Gemara from Kiddushin, which talks about the piercing of the ears. He starts by just distinguishing that it has to be the right ear and not the left ear. The second line in Rashi, let me just make sure the English is on your screen.
That's fine.
Okay.
Number 8.
Umara ozen leveitza mikol shari varim shebaguf. Why specifically the ear as opposed to any other body part? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, Ozen zot sheshama al har Sinai lo tignov v'halach v'ganav. So this is the ear that heard God proclaim at Mount Sinai, lo tignov, don't steal. And this guy, led by his ear, or not led by his ear, but ignoring what his ear heard, went and stole. So that's why the ear specifically is pierced, right? There's the flip Rashi. I thought he brought it here. He doesn't. I apologize that I don't have it. But in Parshat Behar, in Sefer Vayikra, which is the third time that the Torah discusses the treatment of the Eved Ivri, there Rashi brings another Gemara which says, I'm going to paraphrase, I forget the exact, all right, but the Gemara, the Torah says, Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim avadayim, right? It says that the slaves are set free in the 50th year because b'nei Yisrael are my slaves, says God. So there Rashi quotes the Gemara that says, avadayim, they're my servants, v'lo avadim lavadim, and they shouldn't be servants to servants. Right? Meaning every Jew is a servant of God. Every Jew is an Eved Hashem. So if there's a Jew who says, I want to remain a servant to my human master, so that's a rejection of servitude to God. And so it's very inappropriate. And so that's also why specifically the ear, because the ear is the one that heard Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim avadayim, they are my servants, says God, and they shouldn't be servants of humans. Okay, so the ear is pierced. There's another question. So Rashi just told us that the reason that the ear is pierced is because the ear failed, right, or that this person failed to obey that which his ear heard that lo tignov, you shouldn't steal. So it doesn't make sense of the Mahavil Diskin, or Yeshua Leib Diskin asks, if the point of piercing the ear is to show that this person failed to obey the mitzvah of lo tignov, don't steal, so why is the piercing done only after 6 years? Shouldn't that be the first thing that you do? Right? And if a person opts to go free during the Shemitah year, then their ear will never be pierced. And they'll never, suffer the punishment which Rashi says is due to them. So why is the piercing done only after 6 years if the person opts to remain a slave? Any thoughts on that? Everyone understand the question?
The number 6 might be associated with 6 days of Bereshit, of creation, and the 6 days that we work, and we rest on the 7th day in imitation of, or tribute of, Ribono Shel Olam after the creation of everything. And so if you're going to be enslaved on this world, 6 years is actually like in the eye of God is almost is less than a wink of an eye, a blink of an eye. So that's the match that might be made.
Okay, so you're more anticipating, I think, what we're going to see in a second in the Shemi Shmuel. So we'll hold on to Robert's thought, and I think we'll come to it. I think it'll be a better connection with the Shemi Shmuel. But the Mario Diskin says that the real punishments, right, or the Torah's real concern is that this Ganav, this thief, should make restitution and should pay back that which he took from his victim, who's now his master, and that if he's able within the 6 years to come to the proper realization that what I did is wrong and I'm not going to do that again, so that is what the Torah wants. We only come to the point of piercing the ear if he fails to realize that, right? If he hasn't been rehabilitated. I keep thinking. I know I'm the movie guy. I don't know if the rest of it, but everyone remember the Shawshank Redemption?
Yes.
No.
So when he's sitting in front of the parole, when Morgan Freeman is sitting in front of the parole board, and they say, "Are you rehabilitated?" Right? They ask him that question every time he goes. Right. So if you've been rehabilitated, so then the servitude in itself was punishment enough. But if you weren't rehabilitated and you didn't get the message and you don't come to proper outlook, then we need the extra measure of piercing the ears. That's how the Mahavil Diskin explains it. I'm not sure. I think the question might be a better question than the answer that he offers. But anyway, that's the suggestion that he makes.
There is a Rashi that I just saw.
Yeah.
On verse 6, that is, his master will bring him to the court and take him to the door. That verse.
Right.
He is given the relatively light punishment of having his ear pierced, since we give him the benefit of the doubt. He probably stole because of his abject poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And it is certainly natural that he should harbor affection for his wife and children, even though they are not Jewish. Nonetheless, and then he goes on to talk about the power of hearing and Har Sinai and so on. But I was just going to take that idea and to attach it to this other one. At the beginning, it may not be clear really to the court the reasons why he did things or didn't do things and what his feelings really are. But after 6 years, hopefully his master or others around him, given the kind of treatment that he would receive, which would be very noble treatment, and the possibility for a less hierarchical conversations might occur. By that time, they would have a better idea of what was really on his mind and heart, you know.
Okay. Okay.
It's similar idea, I think, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I think so. Yeah, that could be. Okay. So that was one question. The Shemi Shmuel, the Sagachaffer. Um, so he quotes an idea from his father. His father is known as the Avnei Nezer. Very important, right? Very interesting because this is a Hasidic family, but is known for their, at least the Avnei Nezer is known for his work on halacha, which is not, that's not how things normally work out or typically work out. So he quotes his father, um, Adonai Avi Mori Verebi Zecher Tzadik Livracha Dikdek. So he quotes his father. Lama Kativ Kan Lashon Ivri Bishinui Lashon Mikol Torah Dichtiv Belashon Israel. Right? The Torah here refers to our servants as Hitikne Eved Ivri, as a Hebrew servant. It says normally the Torah refers to someone of the Jewish faith as a Yisrael. Hitikne Eved Yisraeli. So why is it here is he called an Eved Ivri? Why is it specifically a Hebrew servant and not an Israelite servant?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he wants to know. V'amarhu zecher tzadik livracha. He quotes the Zohar. I don't fully know what the Zohar means here, but Tehine Bezohar Kodesh Amor Ba'ever Hanahar Yashu Avotechem Me'olam. It quotes a pasuk that might be familiar to us because it's included in the Haggadah. Yehoshua says, right, Be'ever Hanahar Yashu Avotechem, your ancestors, your forefathers dwelled on the east of the Euphrates, or beyond the Euphrates. Me'olam. My kai ba'i hachi ella la'achza chachmata me'ever hanahar. So he says in the Hasidic, in a mystical way, this means that they lived my kai ba'u ella la'achaza chachmata me'ever hanahar, that they drew their wisdom from beyond the river, from beyond the Nahar. Me'olam. Ela nahar olam ikri, right? This river, this mystical river that the Zohar is talking about is called olam. It's called the world. The shem Ivri, hu al shem Aver hanahar. So when this person, or any time we have a person referred to as Ivri, as a Hebrew, it refers to someone who lives or who comes from Aver hanahar, from beyond the river. V'shemahu more al malchut Yisrael. And this name gets at a key character trait of the Jewish people, of the Israelites. Shehem mipnimiyut umeolam hacherut. That we are from, we are an inner people, right? We're people who come from the world of freedom, right? The world of freedom, I think, is understood here to mean a world free of material concerns, a world of pure spirituality, a world that we don't have to worry about much of the stuff that we worry about in this world. לכן לא נמצא אצל עבד עברי שיעבוד לעולם, אחר שהוא בעצם מעולם החירות. So therefore, this Hebrew servant doesn't serve eternally, but rather just for this short period of time, because he, in his essence, comes from the world of freedom. V'af avonotav nitzkalkel alav shia eved, and even though he messed up and he sinned, and now he's a servant. Hurak b'sheish shanim. It is only for 6 years. Why? Because what does the number 6 represent? Different from what Robert said, but I think it ties in nicely, as hopefully we'll see. Says there are 6 directions. Think about the lulav and etrog when we wave lulav and etrog, right? So we know there's north, east, west, south, up and down, or forward and back, depending on where you're oriented, right? So 4 cardinal directions, up and down, or forward and backwards. That's 6. And the 7th, Aval B'Shvi'it, Shehi HaPnimiyut, Shav Uba Limkoro Olam HaCherut. The 7th represents inward. So we wave lulav and etrog. Many people go right to each direction, then bring it into themselves. He says that really the 7th direction is the inner focus. It's focused inward. And that's a focus on, we want to call it pure spirituality, if we want to call it that sort of idea that we talk about sometimes of the Pintele Yid, right? The pure Jewish soul, pure neshama that exists in each one of us. So that's what 7 represents. So yeah, this person who messed up and sinned has to serve for 6 years, corresponding to the 6 earthly directions, the 6 earthly orientations. But by year 7, which represents the inner spiritual focus, by that point, the person should be restored to their original self, right? That's why it's called Ivri, because their source, their identity, their core identity comes Me'aver, from beyond the physical in that spiritual realm. Right, so that's why he's called an Eved Ivri, because it talks that is the essence of this commandment, that he should be set free after 7 years, when hopefully by that point he has reconnected with his spiritual pure self. It's not a great translation. It's a little bit of a terse description, but I think it's very powerful to think about the 6 representing the 6 earthly directions, and back to Robert's point, 6 represents 6 days of the week, the days of work. 7 represents Shabbos, represents that return to spirituality, that return to that which is pure and holy.
There's also perhaps a more Pashadish kind of understanding. The word Hebrew is used by the Egyptians for us when we were in Mitzrayim. Bring me the Hebrew midwives,
right?
For example,
right.
And there are other examples too. Even a little bit in Bereshit, the usage of that word for them in Egypt. In other words, that's what the Egyptians called them. So it refers to the fact, alluding again to the situation in Egypt before we went out, and taking that kind of identity on again, perhaps by calling it a Hebrew bondsman.
Yeah, right. So the other significance of the use of the term Ivri is in the context of Avraham HaIvri, and we've quoted this many times, right? Where the Medrash says that why is Avraham called Hebrew? So again, right, that it means beyond. It says that hu me'ever echad v'kol ha'olam me'ever sheni, that he stood on one side and the whole world stood on the other side. Right. And so that part of what it means for us to be the descendants of Abraham, to be Hebrews, is to be willing to stand in opposition to the rest of the world. Which I don't think necessarily contradicts what we just saw with the Shem Shmuel, but it's a different take on it. So I think Rav Hirsch also kind of gets at this. Just going to pick up over here in the by his crime. Okay, so by his crime, this thief's crime, he has relapsed into the realm of 6, the purely material physical world. He has not allowed the thought of the 7th, of the invisible but ever-present one, to restrain him from grasping at the visible material. He has lost the fear of God, and thereby has sinned against his own godlike nobility, which is the heritage of man. He has accordingly to achieve the restitution of what he has lost by his sin, by investing the whole of his own material physical existence in subordinating his 6 to work himself up again to 7. Okay, so again, right, the idea that 6 represents the purely physical, the whole, the mundane, and that 7 is some sort of higher spiritual um, realm, and that the idea is that through the servitude, through serving the person that he wronged, that this slave should hopefully come to a realization that his core essence is to identify with 7, with the spiritual realm, and by doing so, if he's able to come to that realization, then he's set free during the Shemitah year. If he doesn't come to that realization and wants to continue to act as a slave, so then he has to go through the extra steps of having his ears pierced, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
Is that point clear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very good. Mm-hmm.
So one more idea, and Gwen, we spoke. This is what you sort of were mentioned at the beginning, right? So Rabbi Sachs, back to more general questions of slavery, right? Rabbi Sachs basically says that and we find a similar idea in the Rambam in right his description of korbanos, of sacrifices. Um, that the Torah was given, the Torah is eternal, but it was given at a specific point in history and in time. And it had to be relatable to the culture, to the mores, to the ethics, to the worldview of that specific time. And so had the Torah said outright, slavery is abhorrent, so we don't like slavery, this is not the Jewish way, that would have been so foreign and so removed, so distant from the reality in which they were living, that it wouldn't have made any sense. It wouldn't be something they could relate to. Right? He says a similar thing with sacrifices that people had, whether there is an ideal in sacrifices or not an ideal, but that people had to sort of be weaned off their improper beliefs, beliefs in idolatry, beliefs in avodah zarah, to proper understanding of what korbanos are all about, and then ultimately from korbanos to more prayer and meditation as sort of what he sees as the ideal form, the ideal service of God. So Rabbi Sachs says that that's what's going on with the Torah's idea, presentation of slavery, is that as we've already seen, it presents a very radical understanding, presentation of slavery from the norms of the world around us, right? That the Hebrew slave was treated so much better than other slaves were treated, and that with the ultimate goal, the ultimate vision, that slavery would become a sort of moot point, that it would become this, for us, as it is for us, a theoretical. It's not something that we will ever practice, right? These are rules which are halacha ve'en l'maaseh. We have these in the Torah simply to learn and to receive reward for the lessons that they have to teach us and for the act and endeavor of making sense of them, but we're never going to practice this. And so the Torah, that's what Rabbi Sachs claims is how we should understand the institution of slavery in the Torah, that it's presented in a way that from the beginning the Torah tells us this is not an ideal, this is not something that is desired, but is a reality. And it's a reality which we should wean ourselves away from. And depending on who you ask, we've done a very good job at that, or even today we continue to do a horrible job at that. And there still certainly is slavery and servitude that exists in the world, right? There's human slavery, human trafficking that we hear a lot about, and there's also, right, the more sort of symbolic ways in which we remain slaves to whatever we remain slaves to, money, power, whatever. But that we should be reading these with the understanding that the Torah is trying to gradually remove this from our worldview. All right, so not quite connected to what we just saw, but I think an important point and something that I know a lot of people struggle with is how could the Torah have these laws of slavery at all? Slavery is a horrible thing, and Rabbi Sachs says you're right, it is a horrible thing, and the Torah recognizes it as a horrible thing and is trying to take us away from it.
Rabbi,
Yes,
I don't know whether I missed something, but uh, did Jews have non-Jewish slaves as well?
yes. So we
Mm.
didn't focus on that tonight. We
Okay.
focus on the Ivri. There certainly are cases in the Torah of non-Jewish slaves,
Mhm.
and there's a whole different way by which a non-Jew becomes a slave, and there's different rules. And we said that the rules are not as mellow as we've seen in the treatment of the Hebrew slave. And
Mhm.
that's a fair question to ask, is
Mhm.
why the distinction?
Mm.
But there certainly is ownership there is recognition of non-Jewish slavery, and they're not set free automatically after 7 years. We're allowed to give them more debasing tasks, um, right? And certainly this issue, this question, um, you know, during the early years of America, when the whole slavery question was a hot topic in the Civil War. So the Jewish community was divided, and you had Jews and rabbis in the South who were making very passionate arguments for slavery, and were using the Torah to justify it. And you had rabbis in the North who were very opposed to slavery and were using Torah to justify it.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and so,
Mm.
yeah, there definitely is a non-Jewish slavery, and I said, well, we'll find another
Mm.
time to explore some of those issues.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think I also missed something.
Okay.
I apologize if I missed it at the beginning. So the Evet Ivri could either be somebody who stole or somebody who became impoverished for other reasons.
Correct. But if it's someone who stole and can't make restitution, so then based in forces him into slavery. If it's someone who's impoverished, they can sell themselves into slavery.
So in that case, the commentaries about raising the person up again maybe don't apply in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, so the Shemi Shmuel did say that, right, that part of this characteristic of drawing from the beyond, from the Aver, from the Ivri, is connected to Chinam, to Cherut, to freedom. Olam HaCherut, the world of freedom, the world in which we're free of whatever material constraints there is in this world. So I think he would still apply that to someone who sells themselves into slavery and then doesn't opt to go free during the Shemitah year.
Right. Right.
He would, that's the real sore point, is the person, however the person gets there, if given the opportunity to go free, they don't take it. So
Right.
that's the real point of contention.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's another whole approach that the Rebbe suggests, that he's saying, but it goes a little beyond what we're talking about, but that there are three different kinds of avoda. So making an example of the non-Jewish bondsman, the Jewish bondsman, or I should say I guess he says non-Jewish bondsman, and then the Jewish bondsman, and then the woman, the bondswoman.
Right.
And each one of them has a different, very different experience of this slavery. And the major point being that in the first case, we certainly don't, unfortunately, realize that the non-Jewish bondman probably is not enjoying what is going on. And the comparison would be the person who has heard the commandments but doesn't have any enthusiasm for going and doing them, they don't have the emotional good feeling. They don't see that they are part of a relationship really in what's happening. The second is the Jewish bondsman, but a Jewish bondsman, for whatever reason, either the court or by themselves, is serving for some very specific ends. They have to remit a debt, or they have to come up with money for some other reason, or get themselves established to go forward again. And that can apply to any of us who are, once we realize how wonderful the Torah really is, and that Hashem's blessings are always connected with it, we might wind up studying Torah and doing mitzvahs for really still are deeply our own animal desires. But the Jewish bondswoman is the one who just simply does that which is right. She makes the food. He's describing her as making the food for the whole household, taking care of others. It's constantly on her mind, and that's just who she is. And so she's held up as the example of one who has really turned her own emotions towards godliness, or living on behalf of others. And we can, in that way, she identify in this paradigm as a Jewish person would identify with God totally, and wouldn't be do not serve for what you can get out of it, right? The saying from Pirkei Avos, roughly stated. So he uses these three as three levels of approach to our own avoda.
Interesting. All right, we're past 9 o'clock, so time flies when we're having fun, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you everyone for a good discussion tonight. This Shabbos, we will read Parshat Mishpatim in Shul. We have an enhanced Kiddush. So hope that everyone will be able to join us.
I hope the ramp is clear.
Yes, and we will.
I don't know if it will be.
I saw some rain or wintry mix in the forecast, so that could either be good or it means everything's going to ice over. So I don't know. We'll have to see. But I hope everyone has a good rest of the week, and we'll see you back here on the Zoom next Tuesday night.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
All right, and Arthur, feel good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Good to see you.
Yeah.